Welcome to my library, dear guest. My name is Ko, and I will be your storyteller. Lean back and relax as I read to you today's story, titled Ex-Girlfriend Forces Fetish Onto Group, by the author, Bio19922. Needless to say, this story will be NSFW, so you have been warned. On to the story. I've been watching a lot of Crit Crab and Den of the Drake on YouTube and really enjoy all the cringy horror stories on there, and had me thinking for a while to just post my own cringe horror story on here, which unfortunately involved my girlfriend at the same time, something my friend group still torments me with. So, making my new Reddit burner account to subject whoever reads this to cringe with me. Full disclosure. We're all assholes in this story. No one here is a good guy. I could have and should have handled everything in my life and this better, but I didn't. So now, I get to write a long story about it here. So I really only play D&D with my close friends. We're a group of 4 and the person who has the most experience is the DM for our group. We'll just call him DM. The other 2 also have more experience than me in D&D because they were in previous games with DM. We'll call them Frog and Cat. I basically joined the group because I wanted to hang out with them, and my first experience with them was over Discord where DM let me roleplay as the big boss fight for my 2 friends, 2 Tumblr randos, and girlfriend. That's a whole other story about how I pissed someone off so bad I think I imploded the campaign, but in my defense it was really funny. Anyways, after that I was slightly more interested in D&D because, hey, I like hanging out with my friends and they like playing D&D. And DM is a really cool guy who isn't super strict and plays by, if it's cool, I'll allow it rules. So, I know it's just mostly us having fun and goofing around and no one getting mad at me for being stupid. That's another horror story of my first ever D&D game that threw me off of playing for years. So we all start a new campaign after the Discord one curled up and died, and it starts out with just the 4 of us. And I really wish I had the foresight to keep it that way. At the time, I was talking to this girl online and, the whole shebang. We had met over our mutual playing of the cringiest game I can think of, League of Legends. Do not date bitches who play Ari in League of Legends. But we were friends and we enjoyed talking and playing games together. I added her to the Discord group chats and it seemed like she was friends with all of my friends as well, because everyone got along and all was well. She had become at least friends with DM and had joined them on their previous campaign. My memory is a bit foggy, so forgive me if I'm a bit vague on the timeline, but we started playing D&D in 2020 during quarantine, and I had invited girlfriend to play D&D around November. See, the thing is, me and her had already briefly dated for a month around the summer, and I had broken it off. I'm definitely in the wrong in the whole relationship scenario of this horror story, because I really should have left things there and not have suggested we try again later in the year in a brief spur of the moment of boredom. I'm trying not to shit-talk her too bad because she was going through her own stuff at the time. But imagine someone who gets attached way too easily dating someone who gets bored too quickly. Yeah. We were still friends after the first breakup, and while things were a little awkward at first, I thought, she didn't seem to hold any resentment towards me, and I didn't towards her, so we were normal soon enough. So, brief backstory explained, you can see how this probably wasn't the smartest move ever to suggest to my friends that we include GF in D&D. But it is integral to tell you, just so you can feel the second-hand embarrassment of my story. We were a mess, and I subjected all my wonderful friends who still put up with me to it. In hindsight, they probably just wanted to see the shit show that would inevitably play out. But we had just started dating again, and I wanted to include her in things. And all my friends were still okay with her, so DM agreed to do the next campaign on Discord so she could join. The trouble began when DM sensed jokingly in the group chat, a Kingdom Death miniature. one that is heavily pregnant. I probably should have pulled the brakes there, and it's making me scream thinking about it. I almost wish we didn't purge and delete the Discord group so I could go back and see the in real time terrifying development taking place. But here is an approximation of what happened. DM. This is real sick freak shit. Oh, someone buy this. Me. Oh, it's fucked. No way. GF. Actually, I might, lol. There was a brief moment where I thought, oh, funny joke, haha. She would not play out a kink or fetish character, surely. While I don't judge people with kinks at all, even with how much of a shithead I am, I know that, hey, that stuff is better left to private convos or for willing spectators. Me? No, well, LMAO. GF? Lol, too late. Me? You're not seriously going to do that, right? GF? Why not? She's cute. And DM allows her to roll a pregnant elf woman barbarian who, by God as her witness, she would make sure we knew it. He now takes full blame on letting her do this and subject us to this, but he thought at the time it was funny, and I'll let him know every time it comes up that I still have nightmares about her character. But also neat thing, DM made her character backstory important to Frost Druids and Auriel in the campaign he was running. But nothing ever came of it because she only played 3 sessions and then we broke up before she could even become relevant to the plot. But I'm so mortified at the thought of my GF actually playing out fetish fantasy in front of all my friends. I just take the coward's way out and I gloss over the whole interaction. I still don't want to believe she would actually do that. No, surely not. She would have more shame than brazenly doing that in a D&D campaign that I invited her to. I think it's a really funny joke that she's playing a pregnant elf barbarian, and go on with my life thinking surely she rolled something else. I think I only mentioned it with her in DMs that it was funny, and that was it. Eggs on my face though, cause what does the DM slam down on the table in front of me one day? A nice little package he got in the mail. So innocent on the outside. I'm speechless when he opens it up, and inside is the thing that plagues me to this day. I hate that fucking miniature. It brings me as much embarrassment as it does amusement from just how god-awful it is. I truly applaud the Kingdom Death creators for kickstarting my second breakup. At this point, it's already too late to change GF's mind. She had her character made and miniature paid for, and I still wanted her to have fun. I did seriously contemplate begging her not to go through with it when I saw the mini IRL, trying to think of ways to politely say that it frankly was gross, but not try to make her feel like shit. But in the end, I talked myself out of it. I told myself I would just be an asshole raining on her parade, and that D&D was only just for fun. Who was I to dictate how she had fun and wanted to spend her money? Plus, the DM seemed fine with it, even though he did find it weird he wasn't telling her no either. But apparently, she hadn't even mentioned most of the shit she would later do to him when making the character. So, at this point, I guess I should say who all the PCs were, because this story is about the horrors she inflicted on the D&D group, not on our relationship. Me. Yuan-Ti cleric guy, the party healer and tank. Good-natured, even if he's a little blunt. Important to the horror story and campaign. He has a semi-adopted goblin baby who he rescued from being sacrificed, and now takes care of looking for its family, but has grown attached to like his own child. Frog. Doppelganger bard, resident ghoul. She's weird and the smartest one out of the whole group, even though she's a little sick freak. Has her own baby, which is just a captive frog that she's slowly killing. Cat. Human warlock with a talking demon sword. Very edgy and epic and does a shit ton of damage. Has many ex-wives in game that want to kill him. GF, elf barbarian who is 24/7 pregnant. DM, quite possibly going to hell. So, to set the scene of her first game with us, we were all currently traveling out of a town that we just saved from a zombie cat invasion. Keep in mind, I'm fairly new to D&D at this point, as I only ever experienced it a handful of separate occasions and never consecutively. This was my first time ever really playing more than a one-shot and role-playing the same character, which I very much like my cleric and was already attached to him within 3 sessions in. So I'm not the best at role-playing, but neither is anyone else in the group, and we're all fine with that. But even as bad as we all are in roleplay, somehow my girlfriend was even worse. I'll give her some leeway, as Discord D&D is just awful, but goddamn she could barely come up with anything to add to the group or roleplays. She would sit quietly for most of the time, and any time she really got into the roleplay, well, it was only when she wanted to fuck. It was just not even worth it to try and interact with her character, simply because nothing would come from it. So we're traveling, and our party comes across, you guessed it, an elf woman in the woods. Woohoo! I can't remember her exact introduction, but I do know I tried to keep my character, well, in character. Meaning he was a bit suspicious of her, but saw that she needed to be healed from a wolf that had attacked her and her child, which again attacked our party. Now I will give her this, cause this was genuinely the funniest thing she could have ever done. She ends up throwing her child on a boomerang at the wolves. She claimed that the baby would help guide it and hit the wolves, and it would be safe and come back to her because it was a boomerang. She gets a nat 1 on the skill check. The wolves scare off her child and drag it into the woods, never to be seen again. We're all laughing at this point because it was pretty hilarious, and I just assumed that, yeah, her character was just a running gag. She wasn't getting weird with it or going to force sexual roleplay with anyone. We laugh, and in character we say, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And she in character shrugs it off and says she can just get another one. I feel at this point it's directed specifically at my character. Now, after this point, if you're sensitive to pregnancy issues or sexual harassment, it only gets worse from here, and I really should warn you that if it upsets you, please don't breed on. Which comes in the first awful mechanic she wanted to enforce upon the DM, which was breeding success. She wanted to roll to see if she could become impregnated, which sure was development in the game, let me tell you. The worst mechanic that DM could have allowed. We all make sure to remind him that he allowed this to happen. I think this whole thing wouldn't be so genuinely horrible if GF didn't seem so into it. Like she genuinely wanted the impregnation roleplay. I don't know what possessed her to want those things. I don't know what possessed her to want to drag me into it with her, as if I would be interested in graphically fucking her character in front of my bros to knock her up. I just don't know when the line between "this is a funny raunchy joke" to "I'm 100% serious about this" blurred in her head. This mechanic would rear its ugly head a few times in the sessions we had, whenever she would try to get anyone to fuck her. DM, while not against people having sexual encounters, firmly did not want to roleplay fucking her with NPCs and would graciously fade to black. But I'm forever grateful that she had only succeeded in pulling this mechanic one time in the last session we ever played with her. My head was in my hands behind the screen at this point. I'm mortified and embarrassed the rest of the session. I tried to shrug it off as just a one-note thing, as it was just... Imagine you invited a person into your close and personal friend group because you think they're okay and chill, only to be proven that they have no chill and no personal boundaries. It was embarrassing. It was like watching your child act out at a public barbecue, and it's your fault they're even in there in the first place, subjecting people to it. But, to my credit, none of my friends had told me she was so aggressively sexual in their own D&D campaigns. The campaign I helped facilitate, its downfall, she apparently was weirdly sexual in that one as well, but to a lesser extent. She just had an elf OC that she wanted to raw dog at any given moment, and was upset when DM transformed him into a cat. But the gist of it is, Cat, Frog, and DM knew she was like this and expected it, but no one was ready for the absolute levels she would take it. So, the session ends. Life moves on, and in another 2 weeks, we're again playing, and this time through some shenanigans. We are in an underground dungeon, in which we have to find a way out of. GF is integrated into the party, but my character doesn't trust her because, he has his own baby, and he saw how she carelessly threw her child into the literal wolves. So it's just me playing in character that he wants nothing to do with her because of in-game reasons. Nothing outside of the game, despite everything. But it's whatever, because honestly, her roleplay sucked. So barely anything came out of it when she did try anything, and she was mostly quiet. Though I remember most of her advances when they happened would be towards me. She constantly wanted to hold my NPC goblin baby, and would make remarks that she could always give me more children if I wanted. I would just awkwardly laugh it off and say no thanks, and demand her character stop making grabby hands at my child. I think it was getting awkward for the other people on the call too, cause most of these instances would be quickly talked over by whomever. But then, DM introduced a gnome NPC in the dungeon, who we helped try to escape along with his tiefling helper. The whole thing was that there was a powerful spell upon the dungeon ruins, and that anyone that took something would be damned to be lost forever inside. The gnome happened to have grabbed an artifact from the ruins and has been trying to find his way out ever since, and has no concept of how long it's been. The dungeons were important to my character, because he was UNT, and the only one that could read the inscriptions on walls that said, "Hey, big curse, lol." So it was a neat little dungeon crawler session. Or it would have been if GF, seeing that she was getting nowhere with my cleric, and then set her sights onto the poor bastard gnome. Brief backstory. She had let us know that her first baby daddy was in fact a gnome, which led to jokes about how she likes gnomes the most. Something harmless if a bit vulgar, but all in good fun. It was like the monkey's paw curled when we brought it up. First, she starts hovering around the gnome, wanting to pick him up and carry him around places. DM plays it off like the gnome is ignorant to her advances. Again, she's barely a character in our game, just there for the ride and free sexual harassment. We mostly go through the dungeon without her, fighting a basilisk. That frog blew up by shoving a fireball head up its ass, and solving puzzles and whatnot. All's well until we reach the final stretch of the dungeon, and where the gnome and tiefling backstab the party and turn out to want to steal an ancient artifact deep inside, after we had seemingly convinced them to leave behind any items they held so we could leave. At this point, the tiefling had captured my NPC goblin baby, and was threatening to throw it down a hole in the center of the room. I was trying to talk the tiefling into letting the baby go, and that we would just leave without them and not fight, when my persuasion check fails and he lets the baby go. Down the hole. I'm single-mindedly trying to keep my child alive, so I dive after it, but not before GF figures out how she can single-handedly ruin the whole climax. Sprinting at full speed at the gnome, she yells at the top of her lungs, "I am going to breed you." The feeling of hearing that right then was like I was the one that fell down a 90-foot deep hole in the earth. What in the hell is going on? Everyone in the call choked, and it was up to DM to somehow prevent the imminent rape about to happen. Which he does by blowing the gnome's brains out with a gun before she can reach him. He reminds us to this day that this was a mercy killing. GF claimed later that that was just her battle cry, and that she wouldn't have raped the gnome, but instead was going for a killing blow, which is... I don't want to think about how she would read a dead corpse. Frog and Cat both try to help me out of the hole, where during this whole thing I'm clinging onto the side with NPC Goblin in my other arm. We all kinda don't know what to do after that. That was the single most interaction GF seemed to display. DM takes this time to magically shove all of us down and has the tiefling shoot himself in the head as well before we fall. And that ends session 2 with GF, which I would only suffer through one more before going into witness protection D&D to avoid playing with her. At that point, I just didn't know what to do besides kicking her out completely. But I knew the shitstorm that would happen if I did that. And I don't think anyone else wanted to play with her either anymore. But no one's saying anything. I try asking if everyone's okay with her playing with us, and I can tell her to stop if they wanted. But they all shrug and say it's fine. But I know now that both me and Frog had DM'd DM telling him this was weird and gross. In all honesty, I just wanted someone to tell me to kick her, so I wouldn't have to take the brunt of all her anger. I just knew she would have a meltdown about not being allowed to play D&D with us, and it would have been so much easier to say, yeah, Frog didn't want you in. Sorry, and leave it at that. I should have handled it differently. I know that now, that I should have said this wasn't cool and no one wanted to play D&D with her when she does this. But I didn't. Talking about it now with everyone, they just thought maybe they were being the only one grossed out by her actions. So they didn't want to come up to me and tell me my GF was gross, even though I fully knew she was being gross. In all honesty, it wasn't like we were all saints and never made dirty jokes. It was that GF went way too far with her quote-unquote jokes, and everyone felt like they didn't have room to talk because they made a piss joke or two. We have the third and final session with GF soon enough, where it's just a fun Christmas-themed game. It was honestly really enjoyable, and the least horny GF was the whole time. Until the very end. Like last game. In this session, Frog and Cat pretty much completely ignored GF. I felt some pity for her because, well, we were dating still. And she really only had me and DM to talk to now in games. So I would try to interact with her character from time to time, which was a bust anyways. She stayed quiet most of the game, but when she did do stuff, she seemed to be having fun. She didn't try to fuck anyone while we were role-playing in the town, and that's a big plus for me. The boss of the session happens, which is a Grinch/Compass monster that you had to put out treats for unless you didn't want your child. And again, my NPC Goblin Baby was in danger because he had eaten one of the treats meant for the monster. This fight is fun, and my character gets knocked out killing the big guy, but makes it because that was the final blow and he was healed in time. But this is the home stretch of the session, so you know what that means. Time for GF to become foul. Which brings in an awful revelation, but GF wanted her breast milk to be able to heal people by drinking it. And she wanted it to be my character she stuck her leaky nipples onto. Thank you, DM, for not allowing that to happen simply because you didn't want to have to roleplay how I suckled on her teats. So I'm healed. The townspeople thank us, and I honestly don't know what brought us here, but GF soon finds an orc in the crowd. One that was thanking us for helping keep his single surviving son safe. She instantly asks if the orc wants to recreate his family that was ravaged by years of this monster taking every Christmas. We're all quiet during this. DM asks her to make a persuasion roll. planning to make it high. She rolls a nat 20. I see DM sigh and say yes, he brings you to his home. She giggles and asks again what she should roll for the impregnation check. DM sounds like he's about to be hung at the gallows when he informs her. We all contemplate our choices bringing us here when she squeals and says she made it, that she is officially pregnant again. Frog and Cat won't even look at me. We leave the session off there. Outside of the game, she informs us that due to some fucked up thing like a fertility god or something, that she gets super pregnant super fast and is already showing like she's about to give birth. We all nod and say nothing. It's later on that we're all hanging out again when Kat brings up, what if she just had miscarriage rolls? Insert blinking man in shock gif. This, apparently, was his idea to give DM an out of his horrible mistake of letting her have impregnation rolls. Frog agrees with giving her miscarriage rolls. DM refuses to give her miscarriage rolls because he's not going to roleplay that. I make the decision to, somehow, by all costs, dodge GF being able to play with us ever again. Discord really did save my ass by being pure shit. You see, last session GF would cut out quite frequently, and while the first 2 sessions were on call, where we were all in our own houses, the 3rd session we decided to do in person because it was more of a social hangout for us than anything, and hopping on Discord was just not cutting it, and quarantine was making us all stir crazy. So we had tried to set up a flooding GF video call while watching the D&D board the 3rd session, which ended up being the perfect excuse to play without her, because we unfortunately were going to play in person from now on, and the connection was just so spotty when we tried it, and we couldn't hear her talk at all. So I used that as a way to ward her off. I know I'm a real asshole for doing it that way. She made everyone uncomfortable, and really, I just was a shitty partner. So, that was the end of that. We never got a chance to play with her ever again. Soon after, me and her broke up for a second and final time. Not just because of D&D, we had other issues, but I don't think D&D helped. Me and my friends still play D&D, and we're a good year into this campaign that we were originally playing. The 3 sessions with my ex-GF seemed like a fever dream. DM entirely repressed that she tried to rape a gnome until I brought up I might write for this thread about her. I think we all want to forget that time I invited someone who only tried to fetish roleplay her pregnancy kink in the whole time. But some things in hindsight are pretty funny as they are awful. They still make fun of me from time to time about it, and we're probably going to ceremoniously smash a pregnant miniature because everyone refuses to touch it. And that was today's story. I hope you enjoyed your stay, and that I will see you again soon. For there are always more stories to be shared.